Hello, everybody. If I could have your attention. First of all, I just want to thank everyone. My name is David Wilkins. For those of you who don't know, I'm the director of the program on the legal profession. This is our almost weekly speaker series in which we invite interesting people from around the world who are doing interesting things related to the legal profession. This is the last one that we'll have this semester, and it is a testament to the drawing power of our speaker that we have so many of you in attendance at a time in which students are studying for exams, etc. And moreover, that we don't just have people here from the law school, but we have people from all over the university. It is a testament to the fact that our guest Raj Kumar is creating something really new in the world. I had the great pleasure of having a visit from Raj, this was probably 2008 or 2009, where he said, you know, I'm thinking about starting a school, and, you know, I got some backing, and it's going to be a new kind of law school. And so I said to him, well, terrific, Raj, you know, first let's have 3 years of planning meetings, and then we get an advisory committee, and then we put a curriculum together, and then we begin to think about students, and, you know, in maybe a decade, you'd have your first student enrolled. He said, no, we're going to be open by August. And sure enough, I was honored to go to the groundbreaking ceremony of the, not the groundbreaking ceremony, the building was already built practically. This was the dedication ceremony of the founder, O.P. Jindal, and they admitted their first students that year, and they've now graduated students. They now have a public policy school. They now have a business school. In fact, I haven't checked in a week and a half. There are probably more schools that I'm not quite fully familiar with. They've signed memorandums of understanding with leading universities around the world, including one that was just signed 2 days ago when Raj was, where were you, David? In Florida. And they are really recreating something very, very new in the world. And it is my great pleasure to present to you my friend, our former student, and the Vice Chancellor of the O.P. Jindal University, C. Raj Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. It's always a pleasure to be back here. I was telling my Dean Sudarshan when I was walking this morning in the campus here, lots of memories from my student days here in 99 and 2000. And I can't help but acknowledge the presence of Gail Huppert, who was the Deputy Director of the Graduate Programs, a great source of inspiration for all what I could do all these years, and thank you, Gail, for coming here. And the room has two other individuals who inspired me a lot. Stephen Marks was a professor at the Harvard School of Public Health and also sits in our governing body of the university, and of course David Wilkins. He was present on 7th August 2009, even before the faculty members, even before the students, even before anybody walked into campus. And so thank you so much, David, for all what you've done all these years. I think the journey has been quite extraordinary. I mean, in terms of our the learning experiences, I have come to believe, in fact, many of the serious concerns that I had about India and about legal education, about legal profession, about judicial process, about access to justice, about rule of law, has only further strengthened and informed my own understanding about what works in India, what doesn't, and what ought to work, and how we can make it happen. There is no doubt about the fact that whatever happens in India is also going to be profoundly influential for many parts of the developing world, clearly, but also beyond that. Some of the issues that are being discussed and debated in India today will have profound implications for not just Asia, but also beyond. And in that sense, what happens and what takes place in universities and law schools does matter. And I'm once again very thankful to the program on legal profession. I also want to acknowledge the presence of Kathleen, as well as my two deans, the Dean of the Business School, Professor Gopinath, and the Dean of the School of Government and Public Policy, Professor Sudarshan, both of whom are leading two of the important schools within the university, So happened that Dean Gopinath is a professor, used to be a professor at the University of Suffolk here, and we had the privilege to hire him as the Dean of our business school. So thank you, Gopi, for your presence. There is something which must be here. Yeah. Okay. So this topic is pretty much what we've been, living through all these years, and the idea was to reflect upon some of the major challenges of legal education in the Indian context. I know some of you are familiar with the Indian context, but it would be useful to put the broader context into perspective. India has over 1,000 law schools, and you need to understand the complexity of that. These law schools are spread across the country. They are public institutions as law faculties and departments of law in larger universities. They are private law schools, colleges affiliated to university. Some of them are standalone institutions, but basically the entire gamut of legal education has grown exponentially in the last decade, and increasingly it is expanding so much. I can't help but reflect upon the conversation. Last year I was in my hometown. I belong to a place called Kanyakumari, which is the southernmost tip of India, and one of the ministers of the previous ministry there is a tourism minister, is a cabinet minister, and he wanted to meet me and said, I wanted to have a talk with you, and I didn't know why he was wanting to meet me, so I just met him, and then he said in Tamil language, translate, he said, I want to start a law school. So I said, what do you mean? You are the cabinet minister of tourism and you must be busy with doing important things, and why do you want to law? And then he said, oh yeah, I know, but I have just come to know that there is a lot of scope in this law school business, and I want to start this law school. And that observation which he meant about, he essentially said the law school business. And that's the story of the contemporary India as a tryst with higher education, that increasingly higher education institutions, including law and business schools, have become a big business, wherein mediocre institutions have expanded quite significantly, and all kinds of people have come into the process of establishing and running law schools as well as other institutions, which is also the sort of dichotomy that prevails when it comes to raising the quality of higher education, including the legal education, which is part of our own agenda. But then it's also important to mention, and one of the rather unfortunate consequences of the debate surrounding legal education is that most of the debate surrounding legal education in India happens to focus largely on the national law schools of India, which are approximately 15 to 17 numbers. It's like increasingly becoming like a Walmart in a city. Every state in the country wants to establish a national law school. You must be familiar with the national law school in Bangalore, which was the first one, but increasingly every state is wanting to create, quote unquote, a national law school. And the movement and the propensity to create the national law school is almost becoming a pride of a particular state. A new state is being created in India, known as Telangana, as a part carved out from the state of Andhra Pradesh, and already it has been announced that the new state of Telangana will have a national law school, and of course an IIT and an IIM and others. Now, of course, it is now clearly there is enough empirical evidence to show that every national law school that we ended up creating, not just in law, but also if you look at the IIT, the IIM, there is a case of diminishing marginal returns where the next institution we end up building is relatively inferior to the previous one, and the kind of resources that are required and the kind of imagination and vision that ought to shape these institutions have been largely not forthcoming. But then India has beautifully sort of mastered the art of exclusionary process of intake of students, which pretty much developed the reputation of all institutions. So, for example, we are a 1.25 billion people. A lot of bright young people are spread across the country wanting to seek admissions into the leading institutions. I mean, the statistics are staggering. So, I mentioned 1.25 billion people. 50% of this 1.25 billion people are less than 25 years old. So we are talking of 800 million people less than 25 years of age aspiring to get into higher education. 65% of these people are less than 35 years old. Imagine almost 900 plus million people are wanting to come into education of different kinds in different professions. So there are lots of bright, smart young people who are going to be wanting to come into higher education, including legal education, and clearly we don't have enough institutions for them. In fact, one of the important lessons that at least we have learned in the process of building this institution is that legal education, like any other education, should not be understood in an isolated context. It has to be discussed and debated and understood in the larger context of higher education and the pedagogy of the national law schools in particular, where single discipline frameworks were evolved to create institutions have increasingly come into sharp criticism internally. In fact, very famously last week, and he's been talking about it more often, Professor Madhav Menon, who is the founding director of National Law School, has become extremely critical of the National Law Schools as an institution, and he has even said that he regrets the establishment of the National Law Schools in the framework in which it has evolved over the years. And many of his criticisms are based upon the fact that some of the larger issues surrounding social justice, social engineering, and law being an instrument of social change has not been met by the graduates of national law schools, and the fact that the vision of the school that has got evolved over the years has become so far away from those aspirations has been a single most, I would say, powerful critique of the national law schools. And he's, although I do differ from some of those aspects of his criticism, and he's now working to evolve what he calls a 4-year law curriculum, which is going to be for the rural lawyering, in which a large number of law schools or legal education ought to take place in the most rural parts of India, in which a new form of legal education needs to be evolved, and that's something which we can talk a little later about. So this is something to read this quote at Harvard Law School. So in 1917, Yale Law School's Reform Initiative talked about the fact that study of law and its evolution historically, comparatively, analytically, and critically, with the purpose of directing its development in the future, improving its administration, and on perfecting its methods of legislation. This continues to dominate the vision for most law schools around the world, but definitely this is one of the themes on the basis of which we are evolving our own institutional experiences. So the big challenges that I believe that the legal education is throwing up for the future is the fact that how do we establish a rule of law society? In fact, there is something so strange about teaching law in India, where increasingly and quite dramatically every law gets broken. And so you need to instill a sense of faith in the rule of law in a system which is inherently not amenable to the idea of protecting the rule of law. The power holders very frequently engage in systematic violations of the rule of law. The respect for the rule of law among the larger citizenry, of course the power holders themselves, is pretty limited. And so to be able to instill faith in the rule of law and to teach law in law schools in the context of a society which is struggling to establish a rule of law society is one of the single most important challenges that law schools ought to be addressing. And that's also one of the, I would say, important concerns for us as a law school. And I'm sure there are many other law schools which are constantly facing the dilemma. There is also the challenge, the improving the civil and criminal justice systems. I mean, the data is writ large. Forget the delays in the Indian legal system. Everything about the legal system's processes has come into significant stress. In fact, a couple of years back, Mark Galanter gave a lecture in which there is a myth that is being promoted in some quarters in India, that India is a highly litigious society, that Indians tend to go to court, and one of the reasons why this 30 million cases are pending in the Indian courts from the Supreme Court all the way to the lower courts is happens to be the fact that India is litigious. And he argued, and quite powerfully, that that's not the case at all. India is not a litigious society. The average number of cases that are going in the system with regard to the population is not at all much. It's not that the cases are, too many cases are going in, but none of them come out. The real problem is the fact that the cases which end up going in don't come out of the system, and we need to address the significant challenges that ensure that these cases actually go in. And then he argues, even more interestingly, that Indians are actually quite smart about it, meaning that if they really want to solve a problem, they actually don't go to the court. If they don't want to solve the problem and they want to actually have the disputes linger in the court system, they go to the court. So they are discriminating when it comes to litigations, when it comes to court-based litigations, because they are fully aware of the fact that when you actually go to the court system, you're not going to get a remedy quickly, and definitely that prolongs the process. It creates lots of opportunities to have vested interests float around. And unfortunately, with the view to changing that, addressing that, there have been a number of steps to address that. And that's part of the legal education reform process too, that how do you improve the quality of the administration of justice. And one of the methods was to develop and grow the ADR system, alternative dispute resolution, mediation, arbitration, conciliation. And each of these systems have unfortunately undermined because of the continuing nature of the existing control of the bench in particular, the judges in particular, but also the existing models of administrative system not allowing new forms of innovation coming into the process of justice delivery. And I think it will take a lot more years for any such reform to take place. The delays that are happening in the existing system has also transferred in different forms to bureaucratic processes of the ADR, and so increasingly companies and corporations which are doing business in India are no longer wanting to keep India as an arbitral venue. You choose Singapore or New York or Hong Kong or anywhere in the world and not Indian arbitral processes. And another downside of this is also the fact that the judges have brought in those practices because of which ADR system got evolved to challenge the status quo that was institutionalized in the judiciary, but the same judges tend to become arbitrators, and many of the processes that ended up in the courts got followed into the ADR system as well. And by the way, India has tried the fast track system, and the new statistics of the fast track courts is that the delays in the fast track courts are more than the regular courts. So you end up creating fast track courts to deal with the delays in the regular courts, and the fast track courts are now clogged, and now we are moving into a stage where what we call tribunalization of justice. So there are all kinds of new tribunals being created, a regulatory tribunal for telecom, to you name it. There is and I am reasonably confident that very slowly these tribunals will also be talking about delays in the tribunals, and so this is the context in which legal education is being addressed. So one of the objectives which globalization is created is that how do we deal with these issues that are facing, and to what extent law schools have a role to play in it. Of course, there have been a number of reform initiatives, at least in the context of various institutions. The National Knowledge Commission has come up with a number of recommendations which are addressing some of these problems. I'm going to skip this PPT. This is available very much for you to take a look at it. But I want to quickly move into the fact that, so as a law school, what are we supposed to be doing in the context of this large problem that is out there? So we have thought about it long and hard, and one of the things which we have addressed, and that's why the fact that some of us got educated in these institutions, including at Harvard, helped us in thinking about the fact that what makes a sound legal system. what makes the delivery of justice accessible to a lot of people, what makes the interpretation of law, the evolution of law, the judicial process, helping and understanding the larger issues that are affecting the legal system. And one of the things which we realize in that process is the fact that what happens in law schools are important. What the nature and context of legal education hopefully will have an impact on the administration of justice, being the lawyers and the judges are the two important constituencies who are going to make a huge difference. I mean, just to give you a perspective, there are nearly, we are graduating approximately 60 to 65,000 lawyers entering the system every year. So we are talking about a huge bar where lawyers are spread across the country doing various aspects of legal work. And the existing pedagogical approach towards legal education is what I call institutionalized mediocrity, in which we have every aspect of legal training is absolutely not not the lawyers, the law students are not equipped to deal with even the basic aspects of legal profession. And so again, just as we are solving the problem of so if you just to go back, the founding of the national law schools in particular was because of the fact that a large number of lawyers and law graduates coming out of the big universities across the country, including the private, the public and all of that, are not able to match with the demands and aspirations of the legal profession. And so you need a new generation of lawyers who are able to think creatively as well. And the second objective was also to bring the legal profession in line with the aspirations of other professions, including medicine and engineering. Before the development of the National Law School and the 5-year integrated BA LLB program, legal education in India was like what is in the US, which is the graduate legal education. In fact, I went to a law school after I went to Delhi University Faculty of Law, where you have a Fulbrighter here present, we do that after your undergraduation, and that's when people study law in that manner. But after that, what happened was the idea of medicine and engineering, where students come into medical school and engineering school after their high school education. Law and legal profession was in many ways attempting to do pretty much what medicine and engineering did, where people take the call of coming into the legal profession early on. Now, this was, in my view, an exclusionary model where we did not attempt to reform the fundamental problems that were inherently affecting the legal education, including the large law schools. We tried to do what we are best at doing, which is to come out with an exclusionary process. So the first exclusionary process was to create this framework of institutions which will create a new generation of lawyers, and we did achieve that, and that's one of the significant achievements of the National Law School. And that's why I told Professor Menon just last week in Kochi when we were in a panel together that he is far too harsh about the National Law Schools. One of the important things the National Law School did was it elevated the quality of lawyering and the people who seek to come into legal profession, and suddenly those bright kids who otherwise would not choose to study law have come into legal studies, and that's an important achievement of the National Law Schools in particular. But this exclusionary model which I was talking about is now being introduced in the form of what is called as the All India Bar Examination. Till a couple of years back, there was absolutely no restriction for any Indian law graduate to be able to enter into the legal profession. Anybody can become a lawyer. You have a law degree, you are deemed to be a lawyer, and you can practice in any courts across the country. There are absolutely no restrictions whatsoever for people to practice. There is no concept of bar exam, there is no concept of anything else which will restrict your entering into the legal profession. A couple of years back, after a lot of legal battles, including the Supreme Court of India intervening, the Bar Council of India and all of them came together and started this All India Bar Examination, which is now creating an important entry barrier where some standards are being infused. You need to pass an examination, and that's how you enter the bar. Now, this, I believe, is a very important and a good step in the right direction. The only problem I have with these solutions is the fact that unless and until we address quality of legal education and the fact that the large number of Indian law graduates continue to be graduating out of these 1,000 law schools spread across the country, these solutions of creating new forms of barriers into entry into legal profession is going to create a new generation of people who are going to be not only ill-equipped to deal with this, but also will be in many ways an equivalent of a disenfranchisement, where their legal education in the first place have excluded them to come into the legal profession. We need to address the fact that what are the reasons for which they have not been equipped to become a good lawyer who can actually pass the bar exam. And that takes me to the point where that the most important thing that defines in my view an educational institution is the quality of the faculty and the teaching pedagogy and the engagement and learning experiences that students have within the law school. And I think it is fair to say that the great institutions of learning, including this, is because of the fact that students who come and study here are not only thoroughly inspired but also hugely empowered through their learning processes, and the professors play a very significant role in that. And not only they play that role in the classroom, but also their scholarship, the publications, the research, their writings have shaped the thinking of generations of students who went on to do great things in life, be it in the legal profession or beyond. That particular model of the focus being on the faculty and the ability of faculty to pursue research is not the basis of the development of Indian law schools, let alone Indian higher education. The mediocrity of Indian higher education can only be explained by a small anecdote, which I will say my professorial friends here have heard that before. Last year, I was sitting with the principal. Principal is the head of a college, probably the most prestigious college in my alma mater, the University of Delhi. This prestigious college is as prestigious as Harvard or MIT in India. And getting into this college is like getting into Harvard. And so I was sitting with this principal in that college, and a parent walked with his daughter and said, Professor, my daughter has secured 98% in her 12th standard, and she would like to 98% is equivalent to, you can say, let's say all A pluses, and maybe all O's and 1 A pluses, for better understanding, that's the equivalent, you can say. And this principal remarked, no, I can't talk to you, please leave. And he asked somebody else to usher this parent out of the room. And he said, I can't talk to you. I don't talk to any student less than 100%. And that essentially means that straight O's and nothing less. Those are the only people he will talk for admission. So I was sitting with him, and I kind of knew the problem. So I told him, Professor, you must be very proud of your situation. You are in this college, and you are just dismissing this bright student who just walked in. She secured 98% in 12th. That's pretty high. She's very bright and smart, I'm sure. You've just rejected her candidature. And for all you know, this student is going to go mostly to Harvard or Yale or Oxford or Cambridge. And at just that year, Richard Levin, the then president of Yale University, was in India. And he famously remarked in Calcutta that he's looking for only students 90%. And he's looking for Indian students who got 90%. And this particular college had a cutoff, as in a limit of 100%, meaning any student who has secured less than 100% is ineligible to apply to this college. And so I said this to this professor, the principal, and he said something which I think is the story of Indian higher education. And he said, he looked around. First he almost thanked me for making that appreciative remarks, which I was very sarcastic, but he didn't get it. Then he said, let me tell you, Professor Kumar, the real story. 30 to 40% of my teachers don't come to work. I cannot do anything about them. Another 30 to 40% are totally useless. They shouldn't be here. I cannot do anything about them. Another 10 to 20% are okay. They're old. They don't do much. And then he said it in Hindi. I'll tell that in Hindi and then translate it. He said, "बच्चे अपने आप पढ़ लेते, हमको कुछ करने का जरूरत नहीं है." Which means the students study on their own. We don't need to do anything about it. We don't need to do anything about it because they study on their own. And since then, 3 Vice Chancellors of National Law Schools, but also many other Vice Chancellors across the country have echoed the same observations. that increasingly the Indian higher education, and including legal education, is based on a beautifully orchestrated auto mode system where the only thing you need to do is to develop an exclusionary model of having an entrance examination which excludes and weeds out everybody. With 1.25 billion people, of which 800 million people are less than 25, you are bound to get extremely bright and smart people. Whichever entrance examination you have the basis for selecting, you select them and you have merit. You don't need to do anything because they're going. And then he said they all come, they join, and then you know what he says? Oh, Facebook and Google hires them right away. And that's true. This college which I'm talking about, Facebook and Google, goes and picks the undergraduates from this college and takes them. They go to town with 100% placements. Students are happy, faculty are happy, and everybody's happy. So the reform impetus in Indian higher education doesn't exist, because some of us can keep talking like what we are doing now, but it is not going to be heard because the system is so beautifully evolved that there is absolutely no need for a reform because there is no existence of crisis. I mean, for educators, it was a shock for me. I felt outraged that somehow it was an affront on my very profession, on my own beliefs, that as an educator, I'm not doing anything because, you know what, these people are so smart that I don't need to do anything. In fact, I don't even need to teach. And that's exactly what happens. Most of these institutions, teaching doesn't happen so frequently, and the level of participation or engagement between teachers and students are fairly limited. Things have gone much worse than my own days in the university, and I can relate to some of the things that what he said. But the point which I really want to address is that what for us as a law school, as a university, is to address the fact that we strongly believe that even if we will increasingly, we are moving into the same situation where, we get 3, 4, 5, this year 4,000 applications for around 300 seats. We recruit the best of the students, and we will also be one of those institutions which are going to have the so-called exclusionary model. Harvard has an exclusionary model. Every institution anywhere in the world which is leading institutions are having exclusionary model of whatever kind. But then what happens in these institutions is that even though you get the brightest, the best of people from around the world, there is something that happens here which is much more profound in the process of creating knowledge, in the process of inspiring, in the process of educating. And that is part of the responsibility of an institution which is much more significant than what any student can bring to that institution. And that is the role which unfortunately most, if not all, Indian institutions have in many ways completely undermined, and this problem is only going to increase further. Of course, the larger issues of higher education may be briefly mentioned. David, you tell me when I should stop so that we should have...
So yeah, we want to have, so we can only go till about 1 o'clock, so you want to...
So there are people who have maybe I'll finish in 5 minutes and then we can... Perfect. So the winding thing, I mean, that's why I didn't want to go through the whole PPT, is that the point which we are focusing a lot is what I just mentioned, which is that the entire focus on, or good part of my energy as the president of the university, we call it in India as Vice Chancellor, is the fact that we want to recruit the best of faculty. We want to bring the best of faculty across schools so that they are able to invest their time, their energy, their own academic commitment, their research aspirations, to be able to do two things. One, to be able to create knowledge wherein they are contributing to research, they are publishing. In fact, one of the packets that you will have in this, one of the booklets you will see in this packet is a booklet called Faculty Publications. In the last 4 years, believe it or not, our faculty members have over 350 publications. This is like one university in the 690 universities of India put together. I can challenge you that all the national law schools put together, and you add another 30 or 40 universities, even then putting together all of them in all their years of existence would not have that many publications. And that's a sad state of affairs in a different way, because we have very little benchmarks for us to internally measure ourselves. We need to constantly set our own benchmarks and, of course, look at around the world to see what kind of benchmarks and assessments we need to have. We also are conscious of the fact that the balance between teaching and research need to be maintained. And quite importantly, if you look at the publications, nearly 52% of these publications are international publications. And also quite a significant number of them are journal articles. That means they are on the citation index, they are quoted and cited across Westlaw and LexisNexis, at least the law school context, but also JSTOR and many other sort of electronic databases. The point I am really trying to draw is that faculty and research are the twin goals of institution building, around which student learning experiences on one hand, and the sort of capacity building and training and development initiatives on the other hand should follow. Faculty and research is the fulcrum of any institution, and unfortunately this message has not at all taken by India, and because of which today we are increasingly facing an embarrassing crisis where even after 65 years of Indian independence, we don't have a single Indian university in the top 200 in the world. This point about the fact that not a single Indian university, including the IITs, the IIMs, let alone the DUs and the JNUs, have not figured in the top 200 is nothing, no less than a big scandal in the country, because of the fact that we of course realize that Harvard with 300 years of history and Oxford with 800 years of history would have figured out there, and they are in those rankings. But the last 2 decades has seen extraordinary changes happening in Southeast Asia. Singapore, South Korea, Taipei, Japan, and mainland China, and of course Hong Kong, have significant developments taking place, and today you will find at least 20 to 30 universities in the top 200 from these countries. Singapore, and it also has overcome some huge myths that used to prevail, wherein the university should be over 100, 200 years old. Nanyang Technological University is a case in point. It's less than 25 years old. It's one of the top 40 in the world. The university I worked, City University of Hong Kong, it's again 25 years old. It's one of the top 100 in the world. And this didn't happen in a magical form. It happened because serious policymakers, higher education policymakers, university leaders, deans of various schools sat and thought about and fundamentally re-examined the way they were running institutions before and how they're going to change it. They were hugely inspired by the great institutions of learning, including universities such as this one, which has shaped their thinking, and how they have contributed to research and knowledge creation is the 2 goals which has led to this change. We at our university are attempting to do a number of things, and I'll say that and stop there. We have introduced a framework whereby the balancing of teaching and research ought to be maintained. The number of hours faculty member teachers will be accordingly reduced to the extent that they can contribute to research. We have also evolved staff development schemes and attractive research grant scheme, as well as research incentives. In fact, we have, I'm very conscious of what I'm about to say. While I very strongly believe what Michael Sandel has argued in his book, what money can't buy, the moral limits of markets, I am also conscious of the fact that incentives are important for people to perform. In fact, Amartya Sen in his own book as Development as Freedom talked about the fact that one cannot underestimate the role and functions of incentives for human beings to perform well. And so we have taken on board the need for incentives, and so for every faculty member who publishes in one of the top journals in the world, he or she gets $1,000 as a gift. So every faculty member has been incentivized by a range of things, including financial incentives, to be able to perform well. Of course, their staff, their career development prospects is also connected to that, and all of this means that the entire trajectory of institution building is having a sharper focus on the role of faculty as well as research. We do think that in the years to come, this is going to impact the possibility of these faculty members, playing an important role in the knowledge creation, but also in advisory capacities, working with the government. Already it is happening. The centers which we have established across the different schools are being consulted by government organizations, intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, corporations, companies. Gopi sits in some of the boards of some of these regulatory bodies. Sudarshan, of course, has been with the UN for many years, and he brings that expertise into it. And there are 3 or 4 big things that was inspired from my studies here, but also my life and work here, which is A, importance of research and scholarship I mentioned, B, importance of movement across different settings. So, for example, people from the government coming into academia, and people from academia going back to government, people from industry going in and drawing and bringing that expertise into the classroom and going back. These are some of those things which continue to inform our thinking. And the last concluding thing which I will say is that all of this also means that the expectations and aspirations of our students need to be met in a manner which cannot be just left by what a myopic focus of internship and placements. And this is one of the big messages that we keep giving to our own students, that one of the big complexities of any university education is the fact that students tend to be, during their educational process, tend to be a little more myopic about their own aspirations, their thinking, their immediate goals are connected to the jobs. In fact, Harold Bloom, who was the Dean of Harvard College, wrote a book, I think it's called Excellence Without Soul, how a great university lost its purpose of education, and he spoke about Harvard. But the point which he talks about, and which is something important for all of us, is that we as educators have a larger responsibility which may not immediately match with the aspirations and goals and perspectives of the students, but it becomes our responsibility to galvanize social consciousness among students, among parents, and among all stakeholders of society to move towards that agenda setting process. And that's the biggest goal for the future of legal education as well as higher education in India. I'll stop here, and thank you so much for your patience.
The floor is open for questions.
Please.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please. Here, and then Amin. Okay.
It's just a comment, actually. So, you were talking about month institutes. I am guessing it's either Stephens or Shriram.
Okay, I have no comments on that.
Yeah.
So I attended one of them, and I think the professors are really good.
Okay.
It's a personal
Sure.
experience, and it was. And I do agree with you in terms of research that there's absolutely no incentive for either students or teachers. I don't think any of the professors I know have actually been publishing, because I believe out here there's this really good trend of people wanting to write and publish, but I don't think that's something that's definitely happening back then.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think you are right on that. The only thing I will say is that there was a generation of Indians who chose to come into academia because of their own commitment to pursue that public service. But the young generation, the young India, which you and I belong to, you more than me, I'm 39.
Say, Raj.
But but David, I have to say, Shashi Tharoor is 57 years old, and he's a good friend, he's repeatedly told in India that a young, dynamic politician. So 57 India is pretty young, so 39 is okay. But the point is, I want to just say that the idea of people coming into academia is something which absolutely doesn't exist even today. So in the last 4.5 years or so since I moved to India, sometime in mid-2008 onwards when I began talking, I have given over 1,000 talks across the country, including at St. Stephens to, Doon School, to National Law Schools, to IIT. And at the end of the talk, I almost always ask a question to students: how many of you want to become teachers? The answer is 0. Nobody. Less than 1%, if at all. Nobody wants to become an academic. So we are in a unique point of time in history when good part of India is wanting to be getting educated in terms of aspiring higher education opportunities, but are unfortunately taught by quote-unquote mediocre people who have nothing better to do, who have been probably rejected in every other career and who have come into the teaching profession. So this is a very serious problem, and I have been very publicly outspoken about it. And unless and until we deal with it, we are not going to solve the problem. You can, by the time they have the new pay commission comes up with like a 7.5% salary increase, and the world has changed so much. And it's not just the salary; it's the environment, it's the possibility to grow within an institution, it is the camaraderie and collegiality of faculty members. If you've been to Delhi University, you can imagine the toxic environment that prevails among faculty members to have a meaningful conversation between them. They wouldn't like to go in a lift together. I mean, forget having a serious conversation.
Okay, good to see you again, and thank you so much for the brilliant presentation. It's always a pleasure listening to you. I'm looking at the same subject matter, but related to Africa, and so it's really a very familiar challenge. And my question to you is, you mentioned something like law school for rural lawyering. Well, for me, it sounded like me going to a doctor only to be told that, well, I was trained to treat local people and poor people, and there are other lawyers who are also doctors who are trained to provide service for rich people and the people in the city. I find that quite challenging. Theoretically, it may sound quite attractive, but if we decide to train people, one for lawyers for the poor people and lawyers for the rich. So I want you to say more on that. The second point is, most of the people that I used to ask questions about legal education are people who have limited capacity to change things. You are not only a dean, you are a vice chancellor, meaning that you have a lot of power to get things done. That is assumption, but what are some of the inhibitions and challenges that really limit your innovation? I know legal education in most countries is regulated either by the bar or there is a special council. So what are some of the challenges that you face in the process of regulating legal education generally? And then finally, I want you to give concrete examples of pedagogical changes, things that you are doing which other schools are not doing. And I know they may not be doing it because perhaps good legal education costs a lot. And I wonder how Jindal is able to provide this fantastic package at an affordable price for the poor, which you always really express concern for. How do you balance that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for those questions, 3 of them. Let me first, the first one I think is that, let me address the last, one of the middle ones you said, what are the big challenges that I face? And the big challenge in India is attitude of people. I mean, you know, most of the time the challenge is to deal with the regulators, with the regulatory bodies, with government agencies, with people who are holding positions of power and responsibility to change their mindset. In fact, you are studying Africa. We've worked in Mozambique and Tanzania, and we have students from Liberia. And you know, the problem is Indians are very arrogant as people, and I have to say that with all due respect to my fellow Indians, and particularly those who hold powers are even more arrogant. So the ability to learn and to share experiences is so limited. So in fact, we were with the dean of the Harvard Kennedy School this morning, and he was very mildly telling about the challenges that they are facing whenever they have the civil servants coming for their training program. And we have the same problems with our public policy school when we do such programs. So the point is, the biggest challenge when it comes to dealing with or working in India and running an institution is the fact that we have to deal with regulators. So in a way, we can call ourselves private, but nothing is really private in India. I mean, everything is so public in that sense. I mean, we have the role of government in our functioning is unimaginable. I mean, you cannot think of, I mean, let alone Harvard, but no institution in this country where, before offering a particular degree program, you need to go to the education secretary and have a committee of bureaucrats determining the syllabus and course outlines and then deciding whether we can run it or not. I mean, that's the level of scrutiny and governmental role in it. The second problem which we are particularly facing is that most of Indian private education, unfortunately, since the 80s when we opened up, is largely driven by mediocre, commercial, profit-making, and at times even dubious endeavors. When we opened up the private sector in higher education, we didn't end up creating the Harvards and the Stanfords and the Yales and the NYUs. We ended up creating all kinds of dubious initiatives in the field of education, which led to a huge pejorative experience of higher education. But because of the fact that the capacity of young people to seek these higher education opportunities, you need a lot of institutions. So every institution has these people and their education experiences or needs are being met. But when we have to differentiate and distinguish ourselves from we are not neither public nor classically private and something unique, And that's the biggest challenge we face. Now, of course, every year by our own, I think credit to all our faculty, we have been able to carve a unique form of reputation and distinction which is different from other private institutions. In fact, The Economist magazine last year published a 25-page article on India, and it identified, and one page was on higher education, and it identified only 3 universities in the entire country of 650 plus universities, ours, Shiv Nara University and Azim Premji universities, as innovations and institutions of excellence. And so that's one big important point. The second related point is about resources. Now, as I don't know whether you know about the story of our university, but Naveen Jindal contributed something like $100 million to create the university. That helps. So, but then he not only contributed the capital for the buildings, the land, the entire running of the place, but also till now he's also contributing to revenue deficit. So we are running on a deficit, and he contributes to capital and he also contributes to revenue deficit. But when we will break even in a couple of years, and so because of that, and then a related point is that because of, again, personal experiences matter. I mean, I didn't spend 1 rupee or $1 to be educated at Harvard. I was given a full fellowship. I went to Oxford because I got the Rhodes Scholarship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone. People like Sudarshan also got that. The reason I mention that is we have the experience of being educated in some of the world's topmost institutions without paying money for it. So that message we were conscious of it. So we spend approximately something like $2 million every year towards scholarship. Nearly 70% of our students studying at our university are on scholarship, which means accessibility is a big deal for us. In fact, if you look at the Indian School of Business Hyderabad, which is a sort of a model like we are, their fee structure is 6 times more than our fee structure. We are consciously, now if we had that fee structure and didn't give fellowship, we could have gotten broken even long back. But the point I am really trying to say is that access to education as well as creating a more inclusive environment within the academic context is very important for us, and the only way we can do that is by ensuring people can afford education. And is there another thing which I missed?
Raj?
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much for being here. This was really inspiring, and my sister goes to Delhi University, so what you said really hit home. So you mentioned the importance of a multidisciplinary institution, and I see that there's now a liberal arts college that's starting up. Have you considered incorporating a science and engineering school? And if not, why not? Because usually science is kept so separate.
No, it's a very good question, very legitimate question. Very early on, we decided to be a social sciences and humanities university, and the 5 schools that we established are law, business, international affairs, public policy, and now liberal arts and humanities. The first reason why we didn't do it is that while $100 million is a lot, when you want to do science seriously, you need a lot of money. You need probably $2 billion. And if somebody is ready to give that, we don't mind doing it. Because let's seriously talk about it. If you want to seriously talk about, you want to be a Caltech, you want to be MIT, you really want to you need a lot of resources. And so we made those choices. And we definitely didn't want to create another, you travel across most parts of India, there are 2 words which you will find. It is either called Institute of Engineering and Management, or Management or Engineering, or Management and Technology, or Engineering and Technology. So it's almost like saying Coke, Coke symbol. I mean, it's like that. So we definitely didn't want to do that. But having said that, with the start of the Liberal Arts and Humanities School, and the collaboration that we've established with Rollins College, which is a very good liberal arts college here in this country, we are addressing that issue in a very unique manner. So those students who are aspiring to major in one of those disciplines can potentially spend those 2 years here in the US and pursue that. And we hope to get the Rollins College faculty to come and do some of that. But we don't plan to set up laboratories. We don't plan to create those schools. But listen, institution building is, for centuries. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But the current thinking is to remain as a humanities and social sciences institution university with stronger focus on a more liberal interdisciplinary education.
Yeah.
Yes. I have 2 questions to ask you. First of all, congratulations. Wonderfully, you have pictured the scene which is going on in India. And also, I congratulate you that, in Global Jindal Law School, how you are experimenting and successfully, doing this. My major concern in the higher education sector is that the poor quality teaching, poor quality teachers, and there is no regulation, there is no training, there is no quality control. Anyone who finishes LLM can become a teacher tomorrow, and he becomes a teacher completely. Okay, he professes, and there is no training given to him, and that kills completely the zeal of the students, kills the subject too. And how to address this is one. And secondly, and what is research is not known to many people in India, as you know. Okay, and we are just peripherally reading and reinventing the wheels every time. We don't really produce scholarship. That's a big challenge. How to do this? Because you are very fortunate. You are able to create such environment in your university. But India is huge. There are many universities in the academic university. How we are going to address this?
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you so much.
The second small question is: you mentioned about the 4-year program suggested by Professor.
Yeah.
Could you please explain?
Sure. Can we?
Do you want to collect
yes,
the questions?
I'll collect.
That's a great idea. So here, and then, did you have your hand up?
Yes.
Yeah, and then behind and then up here. Yeah. We'll just kind of collect the questions.
Yes,
and then
I wanted to say your time.
Yes. So my question is, I had the honor of teaching a small workshop last year at Jindal. I didn't get to meet you, but I met Zurashan. But I was wondering, I was struck at that time by the incredible number of internships that students do there. They do like 10 during their time, right? 8 or 10. Which is so many more than you do in an American law school. And I'm wondering, what's the philosophy behind that? Do you think they actually get enough time on the job? And
Thank you so much for that question.
Yeah.
So just to reflect, it's always wonderful to hear you here. And I just came back, as you know, from the Center for BRICS. I'm wondering, to what extent do you find this BRICS cooperation useful in basically advancing your goals and entrepreneurial initiatives and in terms of institution building? Because it seems like from the Chinese perspective, they really put a lot of emphasis in these academic exchanges and basically learning from each other, like a developmental peer system.
Yeah. Thank you.
So here, and then, yeah.
Please.
Hi. Just to give our colleagues some context, you were talking about numbers of enrollments. There's a vast difference in enrollments and the exclusion between schools in the national system and where you went, which was Delhi, right? 3,000 students, maybe top average. Can you kind of explore that context?
Sure.
Because there's a vast difference in admissions and admissibility and numbers in caps.
Sure.
Last question. Yes.
Hi, I came late, so I'm sorry if my question has been already answered in your address, but I just thought that I'll bounce it off. Now, my concern is on the interdisciplinary approach to legal study. I graduated from Hidayatullah National Law University, Raipur, and then was working in Lakshmi for some time in WTO area. And it has been my own experience working as a lawyer for 5 years that without understanding accountancy, finance, economics, sometimes also some of the softer, maybe sociology and political science, you really can't call yourself as a complete lawyer. You always play second fiddle to someone else. If you're practicing anti-dumping law and you don't know accountancy, you are always a second fiddle to accountant. So I wanted to understand, there has been, everyone says that there has been legal reform in India and 3-year study has been substituted with 5-year study, which is a good progress, which I think was not a good progress at all. You have law and economics courses in every school, but what they teach in law economics is complete trash, bullshit, I would like to use the word. That's the word for
It's a technical term.
No, but
I got your point.
Where can you progress? How can you progress from that? Is there something being done?
Sure. Thank you. Let me be very quick. I know all of you have to rush. Teacher training. Absolutely. We have nothing like that. In fact, universities across the country, really across the world, take a lot of, many years back I got a job at Monash in Australia, which is one of the good universities in Australia, and I was really pleasantly surprised the kind of importance that is given to teacher training. We have no such thing. In fact, what we have done is that couple of years, once a year at least, we do what we call faculty development workshops, in which we call sort of distinguished teachers as well as researchers to come and spend 2-3 days with our faculty. We should do better, we should do more, but there is no such thing, and I entirely agree with you. There is a major problem because but then this is connected to the attitude problem. You need humility. You need humility for people to come into training. Most of our teachers or people who are coming into teaching, they cannot and they just don't need. They feel that they know everything, and so there's no question of they being trained. Research is a major problem, and that's also connected to the fact that the system of learning should be contributing to that research. In fact, unfortunately, what has happened is that we have not developed systematically, courses related to research methodology from an academic standpoint, and also the writing that tends to happen in most of our schools. And here I must say that we are also pretty much unfortunately following the same thing, and we want to regulate that better, which is that many of the faculty members end up giving so many assignments, and there is this sort of proliferation of assignments in which students are engaged in so much of writing, but many of those writings are not really meaningful and doesn't really train them. The good thing about American law schools in particular is the extraordinary emphasis on legal writing and legal writing workshops and the kind of resource intensiveness. It's not just American law schools. We were in Rollins College, and we met with the people who were working what is known as student services, and there is a whole range of emphasis on creative writing and different forms of writing workshops. We need to do a lot more of that. The 4-year, it's still in the preliminary stage. Professor Madhav Menon is leading that. I do personally think, and I share with him on this, that I don't think we should bracket it like this: lawyer for poor people and lawyer for rich people and all kinds of things. I mean, that's pedagogically, it's a very problematic model. But somehow Professor Menon feels very strongly about it, and maybe something might come out of it. It's in the curriculum development stage, and frankly speaking, it might have other difficulties even within the Bar Council. Because if you remember, the traditional law program is 3+3, where undergraduate 3 years and postgraduate. When 5-year law was introduced, it was a huge hue and cry, where you are giving away law degree 1 year less and it's BA LLB. Now you reduce 4-year law, then what is the possibility of you to have a wide range of disciplinary learning? So I do think there are problems. Internships. I mean, unfortunately this is all driven by this sort of, I would say, the CV making. The CV making process, which is where people are so much, focused, and this is a generational problem too. When I was a student in Delhi University, I did so many things, and I didn't even keep track of it. And I was not so ambitious. I didn't even know the existence of Rhodes Scholarship. And after my entire legal education, when I was preparing my CV, I realized that this was pretty good, and I wrote it at that time. But today, I get calls from people in 10th grade who want to do internship. I mean, my entire high school, I only remember of climbing mango trees and spending the vacations like that. So this is the internship is a market-driven problem in which students are so much not interested in what they are actually learning. They want to add many items. And by the way, it's also a problem of how these institutions here. So you look at the CV, because now I am advising young people, and they look at, I am advising a 12th grade student who actually has done so much, but they're all like bullet points. And you ask what he has done, he may be done for 2 weeks. But then there are 5 bullet points in each heading, and there are 25 such items. And yes, Harvard values that, Yale values that, Stanford values that. So this is a larger problem. So obviously the students will also be, but we are personally discouraging any internship which is not less than anything which is less than a month. I mean, frankly speaking, they are not valuable, and increasingly in the business school, the companies and corporations are wanting to have longer internships, which leads to a pre-placement offer and all of that. BRICS. The Center for International Trade and Economic Laws in our own law school did a BRICS conference. We are talking about it, but frankly speaking, this has not driven any significant agenda within the university. I mean, like every other place, today, there was a time when I could do things much more on myself, but I think now as a large university, ultimately the schools have to take the different call. I nudge the deans, I tell them to do certain things, and ultimately they need to take these calls. But this is an area which are of individual interest among our faculty, and they are pursuing that agenda. Numbers, the Indian say legal education model is very, very diversified. So for example, having an entrance examination is not even a requirement. most law schools in the country don't even have an entrance examination for admitting. In fact, they have a view that entrance examination creates an opportunity for these coaching classes and coaching centers to develop a huge business out of it. Many states have expressly avoided having entrance exam and used their high school grade on other things. So there is no one such model, but the numbers are is significantly increasing. The national law schools, we can have a clearer number. So 10 of the national law schools out of the 17 of them use what is known as this common law admission test, and approximately 30,000 people take the test, and of which around 2,000 or so get selected into one of the national law schools. But other than that, it's all very, very scattered. Interdisciplinarity, I entirely agree with you. I think, see, the heart of all of the problem is you can actually use all these words ultimately, but then if you don't have faculty who don't have expertise, who don't have strong academic rigor to be able to advance this agenda, they will not be able to do it. And a related point is the urgency among the Indian law schools and legal, the vice chancellors in particular, to start off law. I mean, I have heard at least again 3 or 4 vice chancellors of major national law schools tell me, oh, this history and political science are all, we just have to quickly get them to law. So the idea is this history, political science, sociology, literature, economics are all sort of hindrances and obstruction to the study of law. And that is something which we have challenged, and it is always so difficult. In fact, most of them don't even have regular faculty. They hire part-time faculty from elsewhere. We have historians, we have political scientists, we have sociologists in our regular faculty hires. So it's a tough battle because the Bar Council's curriculum heavily focuses on law. And even when the Bar Council of India comes and does inspection, they talk about, you infuse law in literature, law in economics, law in sociology. So, and pedagogically, there is a huge problem. So, unless and until we seriously look at interdisciplinarity, we will not be able to address some of the problems and challenges that you mentioned. Yeah.
So, a virtuoso performance. Thank you. There are packets of materials for those of you who didn't see where you can learn much more about this amazing university.